Okay, let's look at chapters 14 through 20 in Frankenstein. There's a major theme in this section going on of exclusion and exile. Sometimes it's sort of self-inflicted, like Victor. Victor excludes himself from his family as he goes off to get his education. I mean, he's geographically far away from them, which makes it hard for him to communicate with them, but he really doesn't try to stay in touch with them. He doesn't send them letters or updates or anything like that. He's really distancing himself, maybe purposely in that way. Whereas the monster, his exclusion and exile is very much not self-inflicted. He really wants to be included, and he tries to seek people out. He's a very social being. He really wants to be with other people. His life would pretty much be okay, probably, if he just like went up into the mountains and sort of lived off the land. He could probably get by pretty well because he does have like super strength, and he's able to get by in really harsh conditions in a way that a regular human couldn't. But he doesn't want that. He's always trying to seek people out. He really wants to be included, to be accepted by Victor. It's kind of this father-son relationship where the son wants to be accepted by the father and acknowledged, and the father won't. Victor's a withholding father. He doesn't ever grant that to the monster. He continually just calls him names and is pretty hard on him. And then with the cottage family as well, he almost comes to see himself as part of the family that lives in the cottage and has this idea that if they could just get to know him, they would accept him. But of course, when he comes in and tries to talk to the father, they find him and are horrified by his appearance and drive him out. So he's constantly in exile from society because of the way he looks. And notice it's not, I mean, he is kind of a monster. He kills people, but he's exiled just because of his appearance. I mean, the people in the cottage, when they see him, they assume that because of his appearance, he's a bad guy, which I don't know, could or could not be true, but it's not because of his actions, it's because of his appearance. Felix's family is in political exile. They've had their wealth taken away from them, so they're sort of financially exiled as well by their poverty. Safi she's always kind of marginalized because of her gender and her culture, so Muslim culture, not super accepting of women like getting educations and all of that, so she's pretty determined to escape that. Walton's exile, again, is like Victor's self-imposed. He goes off on this ship and sails around and wants to make discoveries, but he's also sort of excluded because of his knowledge, his intelligence. He seems to feel like that sort of sets him apart from other guys, and he can't really relate to them, and they can't relate to him because of that. And then there's this constant theme throughout the novel of women sort of existing on the periphery, or being passive, not really being able to take part in the action. We see that with Elizabeth as she sort of just sits by and watches everything that happens to Victor. He goes off to get his education, and she just waits at home, until he can come back and marry her. And she does like try to convince him, he makes a decision, and she tries to convince him, to do something or not to do something. And he does consider that, but she doesn't really have any power. So we have responsibility cropping up again. When the monster comes back and asks Victor to make him a wife, Victor sees this as a possible solution. It would satisfy the monster's desire to have companionship. He says they'd go off to South America and they'd, be happy. They wouldn't bother anyone again. But he really can't bring himself to do it. The idea of making another monster is really horrifying to him. So he does actually start making her. He starts assembling the parts and everything, but then he stops to think about it. So you can see he's changed here. With the first monster, he just did it as fast as he could. And he wasn't horrified at the thought of what he was doing. He didn't consider the consequences of his actions. Where here, he stops to think. Okay, what if she does not want to go off with the monster to South America? What if she wants to go on her own killing rampage and, doesn't like him or whatever? What if they want to have children? Then they would create this whole, like, potentially they would create this race of monsters. And so after he sort of considers these consequences, he rips apart her body. And so we see here, it's more thought than he gave to the monster, but he especially fears her power of reproduction. And if you think about the way that other women are portrayed in this text, that if they're all passive and he is fearing that this new female monster will be more active, will try to assert her will, that's pretty telling of what's going on here in terms of gender and power. So if he's the god, Victor is the god character, and the monster is the Adam character, he wants an Eve, right? But Victor knows that he is not the god character because he can't control everything. He's not all knowing, he's not all powerful. And he sees the creation of his Adam, his monster, as a mistake. And so he doesn't want to make that same mistake again. So, what is the monster's attitude towards humanity? He kind of flips back and forth between between sort of accepting humanity or even desiring to be a part of humanity, and then getting rejected, and then vowing to destroy them or to reject them in turn or something. And so it's kind of the cycle he goes through. So he sees the old man and the villagers. They sort of, drive him out and are horrified by him. So he leaves civilization. He goes back into nature for a while. But then he finds the cottage and the family and he likes them. But then they are horrified by his appearance. So then he vows revenge upon all humanity. And he runs off, but then he sees this girl drowning, and so he saves her. But then the girl's father thinks he was trying to kill her, so then he gets mad again and runs off. And then he finds William and realizes that this is his creator's brother, so he kills him. So you can see he's kind of going back and forth here. Not a very stable person, probably. He wants a wife, and so he goes and he asks Victor to create a wife. And he, again, this idea of a woman sort of making a man better, like they'll get married and she'll reform him and he won't be a murderer anymore. A very romantic notion. But then Victor rips the creation apart and he vows revenge again. So he's always like wanting to be included, not being included, and then vowing revenge or running off and hiding in the woods or something like that. So this is the cycle that he kind of goes through. So you would think that he would be in a good position to make a judgment about humanity. He's educated, he's intelligent, he exists both inside and outside of humanity. He's made of human parts. He's made by a human, and yet he's not considered human, at least by other people in the novel. So what's his verdict? Does he approve of humanity? It seems like there's kind of both, like we were talking about. He kind of goes back and forth. It's sort of a love-hate relationship there. Why is it so important that the monster's companion be female? So when he goes to Victor and he says, I'm lonely, I want there to be somebody like me in the world. I don't want to be the only one like me in the world. Why does it have to be a female? Why does he want a wife? Why doesn't he ask Victor to make a male friend? So we see lots of male friends in the novel. Walton and Victor are parallels. Victor and Clerval are really good friends, and they seem to help each other out a lot. So this idea of like two guys would not be unprecedented. The monster shares many characteristics with Victor and other humans. What is it that makes him inhuman, if you want to argue that he is in fact inhuman? What specifically is different about him? So if you were going to write an essay on this topic, you'd want to look at specifically what is the defining characteristic or trait. So what is it, if you're going to argue that he's inhuman, what is it that he lacks that other humans have? Or what is it that he has that other humans lack? Is it his appearance? Because there are other humans that are ugly, right? And we don't like kick them out of society just because of their appearance? Is it his violence? Well, there are humans certainly that are violent. We may incarcerate them, but we don't consider them to be inhuman, usually. Sometimes we do, I guess. But not in a way that we would start, taking away their rights or treating them like animals or something like that. Although I guess you could make that argument that we do. Or is it his biological composition? Are we talking DNA? Is it because he's made of, he's made of human parts, but it's a variety of human parts. Like it's not one body. It's like Frankenstein took parts from a bunch of different bodies. And we know that because the novel tells us that, but it's also because he's like 8 feet tall. So he has this appearance that is inhuman, and an 8 foot tall person could not have been made from one body. So he's taken from many different bodies. Is it the fact that he is taken from many different bodies, that he doesn't have like continuous DNA throughout his body? So any of those kinds of specific things you could look at if you're writing an essay about this topic.